Baseball fans, you're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Welcome into On Deck. We are just a little over a week away from Major League Baseball spring training, so I thought it was a good time to go ahead and, look ahead to spring training. We're going to talk about the offseason that was. We're going to recap all the deals, all the imports, all the exports. We're also going to talk about the roster breakdown as well, and maybe some surprises in the roster that you may not be expecting come opening day. So without further ado, let's go ahead and recap the offseason. We're going to throw it back to November, and that's really when, everybody found their way out. Sam Hilliard was claimed off waivers. Kevin Pillar, Eddie Rosario, Jesse Chavez, Brad Hand, Jackson Stevens, Colin McHugh, and Kirby Yates all hit free agency and will not be on the Atlanta Braves, at least as of right now. Come this season. Colin McHugh, of course, announced his retirement, so Colin, happy retirement. Everyone else hit the free agent market, and they are not Atlanta Braves anymore. And there's a lot of names in there that I kind of glossed over, but, Eddie Rosario, I mentioned Jesse Chavez. Xavi might find his way back on the roster by the end of the season. Who knows? He hasn't been signed by anybody, so there's still some give and take there. But the biggest name, without a doubt, is Eddie Rosario. Don't forget about Kirby Yates and Kevin Pillar there as well. About November 13th, the Braves started to make moves in the market. They signed catcher Sebastian Rivero to a minor league deal. He also got an invite to spring training. We're going to talk about all of the non-roster invitees in just a few minutes. But about 3 days later, that's when the Braves really started to make more important, consequential moves. One of the biggest moves, I would say, in the offseason was the trade for former White Sox reliever Aaron Bummer. And the reason this was so big was just as much about who we let go as it was who we were bringing in Aaron Bummer. The Braves traded right-handed pitcher Michael Soroka, left-handed pitcher Jared Schuster, shortstop Nicky Lopez, shortstop Braden Shoemake, and right-handed pitcher Riley Gowans. And again, this is for one man and one man only, Aaron Bummer. Aaron Bummer is a guy who, here at On Deck, we've kind of circled for a long time. I remember it was, I think last year during the trade deadline, my little brother Jacob, the unpaid intern, came to me and was like, Tyler, you got to get on this Aaron Bummer guy. I'm like, well, tell me about him, because all I see is an ERA north of, whatever. It didn't seem like a trade that I thought would fit, but he was a lefty reliever, so I was a little intrigued. Aaron Bummer's a guy who, again, pitched for the White Sox. Terrible defensive team, not a good team in general. You get him, you bring him to the Braves. I think he's a guy who, number one, will have a much better defense behind him. His FIP is also, I think, 2 points lower than his ERA, so naturally he's going to improve with a better defense. But beyond that, I think you give him a competitive team to work with in any given day is going to make him perform better. I look at mainly Pierce Johnson. That's the most recent case of this. Pierce Johnson was a guy with an ERA north of 6 last year at the trade deadline. We get him, we bring him to the Braves, and he had a sub-1 ERA for the rest of the way. So my point is, I think a similar future is ahead for Aaron Bummer. I certainly hope it's ahead for Aaron Bummer. And I think this is a good trade because, yes, we gave a lot away. Michael Soroka, Jared Schuster, Braden Shoemake, Nicky Lopez, Riley Gowans. But at the end of the day, a lot of those guys either weren't performing right now, they were stuck in the minors, Braden Shoemake, Riley Gowans, or they were inconsequential to the overall product on the field. Nicky Lopez, as much as we like Nicky Lopez, as much as he did for us last year as a bench piece and a fill-in infielder, he's not consequential to the overall product. The biggest loss, I think, was really Jared Schuster. Jared Schuster was a guy who was, one of our better prospects. He was a big arm. He had major league time put in. Everybody thought he could be a part of the rotation in spring training last year. It just never really amounted to much once he hit the big league mound during the regular season, at least for a long period of time. He'd have a good start, then a bad start. He couldn't get any consistency. I think the Braves kind of just decided to move on and go get a reliever instead. You also gave away Michael Soroka, and we talked about this trade really in depth, so if you missed that video, I suggest you go check that out if you want to get in more depth here. But I do want to say about Michael Soroka, I think Michael Soroka, is not done. I think he could very well be a shining light on the Chicago White Sox, along with a lot of these guys. But Michael Soroka has been through the ringer when it comes to Major League Baseball. 2 Achilles tendon tears. He's just never been able to really move past it. And whether or not he's healthy or not, the results haven't been there. I understand why he got traded. I'll just put it that way. But for the White Sox, they just landed a great prospect in Jared Schuster, Nicky Lopez, fill-in infielder, Braden Shoemaker, who could be a future shortstop for them, Riley Gowans, and Michael Soroka, who they took a chance on. I think this is a good trade for both sides. The Braves need to win now. The White Sox needed to rebuild. But yeah, well, as much of a shocker as the Aaron Bummer trade was, the Braves had another shocker the following day, November 17th. The Braves traded Kyle Wright for Jackson Kowar out of Kansas City. And if you had told me that the Braves would have traded Kyle Wright a year ago, I wouldn't have believed you. If you had told me they would trade for Jackson Kowar and that's it, I really wouldn't have believed you. And in the immediate, I'll be honest with you, it sounded like a mistake until you realize, oh wait, Kyle Wright is hurt through the end of this year. He's not going to pitch at all. The same day, Atlanta lost some members of the bullpen to free agency, Yanni Chirinos, Michael Tonkin, and Kobe Allard. They were gone, along with backup catcher Chadwick Tromp. They all hit free agency. But the Braves would also add a few in the coming days. Reynaldo Lopez, who the Braves really thought would be competing for a starting spot, possibly, had they not landed Chris Sale, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. They got Grant Holmes, Andrew Velasquez, Ben Bowden, Tommy Doyle, Jackson Stevens, and Penn Murphy. And just because a player is on the active roster right now, that does not mean that their roster spot is set in stone. I still think, guys like Reynaldo Lopez, guys like Jackson Stevens, and guys like Penn Murphy, who are on the active roster at the moment, will still be competing for their spot come spring training. I think that goes without saying. So let's go ahead and go to December 3rd, 2023. If you remember Jackson Kowar is the guy that we did trade Kyle Wright for. The Braves traded him along with prospect pitcher Cole Phillips, friend of the channel, has done many interviews with us here. Hated to see Cole go, but they traded Cole and Jackson Kowar to Seattle for Jared Kelenic, Evan White, and Marco Gonzalez. Now, Gonzalez was promptly traded to Pittsburgh for a player to be named later in cash, so he's a moot point. Evan White was traded to the Angels along with Braves prospect left-handed pitcher Tyler Thomas for Max Stassi and David Fletcher. Stassi was ultimately traded to the White Sox for a player to be named later. David Fletcher is still at the Braves and did get an invite to spring training. So I thought, if you're going to lose Kyle Wright, you got to get something back. They got Kelenic, who they believe is going to be their everyday left fielder. And I love the guy's energy. Anytime you see him in an interview, he's positive. He's saying, look, one thing you're going to get out of me is 110% effort. And that's all we can really ask for. I also think moving him to a ballpark like Atlanta, which is a very fair ballpark for a hitter, I think compared to Seattle, that's going to be a big play. And I think, having Kevin Seitzer work with him could be a big play too. Kelenic is a guy who was supposed to be the real deal. And I still think he can be. So I thought this was a solid trade by AA. We got to see how it ages. But yeah, December, that was a big one. And that's ultimately, again, what they got for trading away Kyle Wright. So we got to turn back time a little bit before December. Amidst the trades back and forth, with Jackson Kowar, Max Stassi, all those guys, the Braves made a couple other trades at the same time. The Braves made a couple signings at the same time. December 5th, they got Lurie Garcia, minor league contract, Jorge Juan, minor league contract. They also signed Angel Perdomo, left-handed pitcher, on a free agent signing. He's the guy that's going to be competing to get into the bullpen. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth here in just a minute. On December 8th, the Braves signed Zach Logue, Taylor Widener, and Nick Ward, all to minor league contracts. All of those guys got invites to big league camp, so we'll see what happens come spring training. Angel Perdomo is the only one that I'm really interested in this conversation. He has MLB experience. Last year in 30 appearances, he had an ERA of 3.72 with the Pirates. His expected ERA was 2.75. His K percentage, very good, 37.6, high whiff rate. He could be a nice surprise in the bullpen this year. We'll talk more about him later on. Come mid-December, the Braves make another trade. They trade center fielder Drew Campbell to the Padres for DH Matt Carpenter and left-handed pitcher Ray Kerr. And if you remember, the one that, intrigued everybody in this trade was Matt Carpenter. Matt Carpenter, of course, has had a great career. He's a guy that can hit bombs. He's the guy everybody thought was going to, oh, we got Matt Carpenter. What are we going to do with him? The real get here was Ray Kerr, because the Braves released Matt Carpenter, I think, the next day. I still think they could have got some kind of return out of him. They didn't try. They just flat out released him. The Cardinals did pick him up a month later. But again, the real get here for the Braves was Ray Kerr. They wanted to get left-handed pitching. I told you this offseason. I told you at the trade deadline last year, I thought the biggest priority was left-handed pitching. The Braves made it a point to get some left-handed pitchers in one way or another. Ray Kerr only has 2 years in the big leagues. He's a career 5.06 ERA. He's got good fastball velocity, good strikeout stuff, very similar to Angel Perdomo. They probably feel, and this goes for both Angel Perdomo and Ray Kerr, they probably feel like there's enough raw talent with the high velocity and good strikeout stuff that working in the Braves system with the Braves staff could really make these guys key players. At least it's worth taking a chance on. Then, though, at the end of December, right before the new year, the Braves made the biggest trade. They traded away Vaughn Grissom to the Red Sox for left-handed pitcher Chris Sale and cash. This is a move that I don't know that many people saw coming, but I think everybody kind of knew that Vaughn Grissom was going to see his way out of Atlanta one way or the other. And it's no disrespect to Vaughn Grissom. Vaughn Grissom has had, a great start to his MLB career. He never really found his way as a starter consistently, but when called upon, he performed to the best that he could. I mean, he was a solid hitter, had great bat to ball coordination. He had great, he was a great hitter all the way around. His defense was the biggest question mark, and it was one that the Braves could not get over. It was one that, we never truly saw develop. I always thought they could have put him in left field over Jared Kelenic. They ultimately did not decide to do that. They got a starting pitcher instead, which really, outside left-handed pitching, the Braves had to get a starter this year, and they did. They got Chris Sale. This, I thought, was a great move because Vaughn Grissom was blocked in the Brave system. Orlando Arcia, Ozzie Albies, say what you want about Arcia, but those guys have held the fort down there in the middle infield. And, Vaughn Grissom just could not get his defense together to compete against Arcia. And that's why I thought he could be put in left field after Rosario hit free agency. But that never happened. And I think that Grissom will thrive in Boston. He actually hit his first homer in Fenway with the Braves. I think that it's a good trade on both sides. The Red Sox get a young player who's got plenty of potential. He could be a DH if you wanted him to. The Braves get, of course, Chris Sale, and they get cash back. I like this move a lot. We've already done a full breakdown of this move, much like the Bummer trade. If you missed it, check it out after this video. But we've already gone through. I love the Chris Sale deal. If you want to know why, go check that video. But if we sat here and talked about every move, we'd be here for 2 hours. Let's go ahead and move to January. January 5th, Luis Guillorme signs a free agent deal with the Braves. They signed Jordan Luplow, left field, minor league contract. He did get an invite to spring training. The Braves also signed on January 12th Charlie Culberson as a pitcher. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Charlie Culberson, former third baseman, utility guy, signs a minor league contract as a pitcher. So we will see how that develops. He is not on the non-roster invitees. It wouldn't surprise me if he found his way through the minor league ranks. I think they're going to work with him in the minor league level to see what he can do. On January 15th, the Braves sign a slew of guys to minor league contracts. I'm only going to, pull out a couple of these guys. The biggest one, without a doubt, is Jose Perdomo. He's a shortstop. The Braves have had their eye on this guy for a long time. He signed the highest bonus in the 2024 international class, $5 million. He's 17 years old, and he just got $5 million. Just put that in perspective. They really believe in this kid. I tend to believe in him as well. I think he's by far the biggest name in this list that is on your screen. But I think ultimately he's some years away. He is Venezuelan. He looks up to Ronald Acuna. He wears number 13. Jose Perdomo, just remember the name. In February, we are currently in February, so 4 days ago, the Braves kind of did an under-the-radar move, which is typical. They signed Ken Giles to a minor league deal. Ken Giles is a guy who, has, been kind of overlooked overall in the past few years. He was a guy who, for like 4 years, absolutely dominated big league batters. He's got a career 2.71 ERA, 115 saves, a 12.3 strikeout per nine. That's ridiculous. 2.9 walks per nine, so that's solid. He's in the top 10% of strikeout percentage in 4 seasons. His four-seamer tops out around 98 miles per hour. His slider averages 88. He was with Toronto last season, but he only pitched in 4 games. He, of course, had Tommy John in 2020. In the minors with the Dodgers, he threw 20 innings. He had 32 strikeouts, 19 walks, and an 8.55 ERA. Small sample size. The walks are bad. You don't like that. But the strikeout stuff is still there. They're taking a chance on this guy. He is a proven commodity when healthy. I think they're going with anybody with high velocity, Angel Perdomo, guys like that who have the raw talent but haven't been able to quite perfect it. And I think Ken Giles fits in that list as well. The other guy that I want to mention who is an addition to the team this year, but doesn't get talked about enough, Tyler Matzik. And I know what you're thinking, Tyler, he's been with the team forever. Yeah, but he's back. He's back from injury and pending health, come spring training. I think he is without a doubt going to make it on the roster. Speaking of the roster, let's go ahead and take a look at what I think the Braves 2024 opening day roster will look like. And one would assume that you could take the 26-man roster, split it down the middle, pick 13 pitchers, pick 13 position players, but I think the Braves are likely to pick up an extra pitcher and sacrifice one of those position spots because they have far more competition when it comes to the bullpen than they do position players. Here's what I mean. So let's go ahead and fill in the roster spots that we know for sure will be filled. In your starting rotation, no doubt about it, Max Fried, Spencer Strider, Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, and I'm going to reluctantly say Bryce Elder. I think he'll be there. If he has a rough spring training, that might change, but I think Bryce Elder will be your 5th slot. The year he had last year, obviously great first half, not so great second half. Brian Snitker, I don't believe is going to take him off of that until proven that he cannot perform. In your bullpen, you got Raisel Iglesias, right-handed pitcher Joe Jimenez, right-handed pitcher Pierce Johnson, lefties A.J. Minter, Aaron Bummer, and Tyler Matzik. Those are the guys that I believe without a doubt will be on your opening day roster. I would be thoroughly surprised if any of them were left off. I would be really surprised if Bryce Elder was left off. The only one that I would be a little less surprised about would be like Joe Jimenez. That one could flip depending on his spring training performance. The rest of these guys, I just can't see not being on the roster. So that leaves you 2 to 3 spots in your bullpen that could be filled, but I think it's going to be 3. We're going to assume it's 3 spots to be filled. And it's a good thing that it's 3 and not 2, because take a look at the competition for the bullpen. Look at how many names are in this competition. These are guys that are currently on the active roster, not 26-man roster, but the active roster, and guys that were invited to spring training. And boy, is there a lot of them. So you do have quite a bit of competition. Let's narrow this down a bit. I'm going to tell you my favorites to fill the 3 spots. I got 4. And these are the guys who I think will likely be in the main competition for those slots. Ronaldo Lopez is number 1. I almost put him on the guaranteed to be in there, but with all the competition, it made me not put him on. Ronaldo Lopez was brought in not only to be a bullpen piece, but he was brought in with the idea of possibly starting. I think the Braves have a ton of confidence in him. I think they're going to roll with him at least on opening day. If it fizzles out, it fizzles out. But I think Ronaldo Lopez will be on there. He's at least in my favorite to make it with a good spring training. Angel Perdomo is another one. He's got big league experience. He's got high velocity. He's got strikeout stuff. I think he'll be on there. And not to mention, he is a lefty, and that goes directly into my next pick, which is lefty Ray Kerr. These are guys, 2 guys they picked up. They're high velocity, they're strikeout stuff, and they're young. They have experience. I think those guys could make it. And you put them in there with the Braves staff, they could only get better. The other guy, my fourth guy, the guy that didn't quite make the cut, but I still think has a chance, is Ken Giles. The reason he didn't make the cut is purely because of the injury history. He hasn't been around in a while. I don't know if the Braves are going to take that big of a chance on him just yet. But if he has a great spring training and, and it's just lights out, then there's no reason not to give him the opportunity. So Ken Giles is going to top my list to make it into the Braves bullpen on opening day. But what about the position players, right? We got 12 slots. A lot of these are very obvious, most of which are obvious. The only difference here really is you're switching out Eddie Rosario, you're erasing his name, and then you're writing in Jarred Kelenic. Ronald Acuna Jr., obvious. Michael Harris in center field, obvious. Jarred Kelenic, left field. We already talked about that. Olsen at first, Riley at third, Ozzie at second, Arcia at short. You got Sean Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud as your catchers, and of course Marcell Ozuna at DH. That leaves you with all of 2 slots for the position players. And like I said, there is a lot less competition, at least in terms of name value and really the amount of names. You have 3 guys that are on the roster right now, the active roster. You have Luis Guillorme, JP Martinez, Forrest Wall. I would say Luis Guillorme out of everybody has the best chance to make it on. I can't see, based on the names that I'm looking at, I can't see him being left off. Beyond that, you have 4 catchers that were invited to spring training: Drake Baldwin, Sebastian Rivero, Tyler Tolvey, Chadwick Tromp. I think Chadwick is still the best out of the bunch, but I don't think he's going to make it on the roster. I don't think there's any need. He's more of a taxi squad guy in the sense that you leave him in AAA, and if Murphy or d'Arnaud get hurt, you can call him up at a moment's notice. Infielders that were invited, you have about 7 of them: Ignacio Alvarez, Phillip Evans, David Fletcher, who intrigues me, Alejo Lopez, Andrew Velasquez, Luke Waddell, Luke Williams. Outfielders: Lurie Garcia, Luis Liberato, Jordan Luplow, and Eli White. Majority of these guys you've never heard of, but there are a couple that stand out. I mentioned Luis Guillorme. I think he'll make it on there. And I mentioned there's only going to be 2 slots. Right now, my prediction, and it's going to take a good spring training, my prediction is going to be Luis Guillorme and David Fletcher. Infielder, outfielder, they're going to be your bench spots because that's the only reason you're going to need them. You don't need them to pinch hit, more than likely. They're not going to platoon for Kelenic. There's nobody in there that I want to hit over Kelenic, whether he's facing a lefty or righty, either way. So really the only thing I want them there is in the off chance that someone is to be hurt, someone needs an off day, they are there to play defense, and anything they do offensively is gravy. Not to say they can't perform offensively, but I don't think that's why they're there. But my pick right now is Luis Guillorme and David Fletcher for position players. That's going to round out my predictions for the opening day roster. Let me know what you thought about it down below. Please do that. And of course, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date with everything going on right here at On Deck. We'll see you next time.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.